How you doing? My name's Rusty Gardner. I'm 55 years old. I'm a sinner that was saved by grace. Uh, January 24th, 2003 is my sobriety date, and that's the day that I turned my life over to Christ and Jesus rescued me from the pits of hell. I was addicted to meth. I was alcoholic that drank. I smoked weed every single day. And I'm going to start out with this by just going back and telling you a little bit about myself. I had a normal childhood. My parents divorced at an early age. I had a stepdad step into my life when I was in about the third grade. He was a good man. My parents raised me. They were good people. There was no drinking ever in my house. My dad was an alcoholic, but him and my mom divorced. And my stepdad or my mom never drank. Well, I started simply sneaking around drinking beer when I was in the 6th or 7th grade. Started smoking marijuana when I was in the junior high school in about the 7th grade. My addiction just started growing faster. I went from smoking a little bit of weed to dabbling in some other dope. Started doing a little bit of cocaine. There was a lot of hash around. In the 70s, smoked a lot of hash, opium, stuff like that, and taking pills. Really got turned on to meth after I'd been getting high for a few years, and meth was something that $10 or $15 worth would keep you going for 2 days, and I just got addicted. Started hanging around the wrong people. Started off first by just snorting it, and then had somebody that showed me how to use a needle, and I started shooting up dope, mainly speed. I wasn't one of the types that liked to go down. I wanted to go fast, and I tried pretty much everything. I tried heroin before. I did pretty much did a lot of LSD, you name it, any type of pill or powder. If it's out there, I tried it at one time or another. I'm lucky to be alive today. I watched friends that were very close to me die from overdose. I had friends get killed in car wrecks from drunk driving. I've been in wrecks where we was drunk and I got ejected out of the car and it didn't hurt me. So God kept me around for some reason, and I realized today that God had plans for my life. And but I just want to cut right to the chase. I don't want to tell you, basically you understand I was addicted, and I ended up going to California when I was about 21 years old. That's where my dad had moved, was to California from Mississippi. I grew up in Greenville, Mississippi. I moved to California, and when I got there, I met my future wife. She was bartender, go figure. I'm a drug addict. What I need somebody to give me free drinks. But I met a beautiful girl, but unfortunately I was in a bad way. I was addicted to dope, and I really got off on the wrong foot in life. You know what I mean? I didn't deserve to live the way I was living, because I bet I was a functioning addict. I still worked every day. I grew up there in Greenville, and my best friend's dad owned a body shop, and so I started learning how to do body work at a young age, and I always had no problem getting a job. And when I got to California, I ended up getting a job, but I was addicted to meth, and I was getting high, speeding all the time, and smoking weed every single day. Ended up getting a couple DUIs and got in some trouble finally in California, and ended up marrying. Me and my wife moved to Reno, Nevada. We got married there. During our addiction, my wife had 2 miscarriages that I know of. It was probably because of the way we was living, but they were very early on in the pregnancy. So, and that didn't really affect me. I kept getting high. Finally, we moved. When you're a drug addict, you move a lot. We ended up all the way in Florida. And that's where my first son was born. I've got 3 wonderful boys today. I got a 27-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 16-year-old. And my first son was born in Florida. Me and my wife both was addicted to drugs. My wife didn't get high the whole time she was pregnant. or drink, but that didn't stop me. I kept, and I did enough for both of us, and it was sickening when I think back. I don't know how I stayed alive, but like I say, I was a functioning addict. I got up, went to work pretty much. I missed a lot of Mondays because of hangovers, but anyway, fast forward in life, we ended up moving back to Mississippi, and so my other two kids were born there. I got three boys, Thomas, Russell, and Joseph, and and we lived in Pearl, Mississippi, and that's where I started really getting in the bad part of my addiction. I was around the people that were cooking it. I was never really did it in front of my kids. I thought I had them fooled along with everybody else, which of course I didn't. I understand that now. But there's a few things that happened to me right before I hit bottom. I got pulled over in a car and had a bunch of meth, and somehow that night they didn't find it. They didn't take me to jail, even though I was driving with a can of beer between my legs. I don't know how the cop let me go, but if they would have searched the car at all, they would have found meth, and I would have went to penitentiary. Little did I know, just 2 weeks after that, my wife would be leaving me, and I come home from work one Friday. This was January 24th, 2003. I come home from work like any other Friday. I had a half gallon of whiskey and about a half ounce of weed, and I came home to a note. My wife had secretly taken our kids out of school and told the schools that we were moving, and which I knew nothing about it. And so she was gone. She had about a 10-hour head start. Her parents had sent her some money, and she was leaving Pearl, Mississippi to go to California. She left a note saying, "I'm scared. I feel like I don't know you anymore. I'm afraid they're going to take our kids." So, of course, I went into a rage. I never opened a bottle of whiskey that evening for some reason. I just walked around the house. It was 1 month after Christmas, 2003. And I just remember I was just tearing stuff up and couldn't get nobody to answer the phone. Finally, her parents answered and told me that they were on their way to meet her with the trailer, and her dad and her brother were going to make sure that they got to California. And her dad specifically told me I need to not worry about my kids, but I need to get my life in order. I was 40 years old at this time, folks. I'm 55 today. That set a chain of events there that changed my life forever. I ended up face down in the living room floor, pounding my fists into the floor, asking God, how could this happen to me? Why me? How did my life end up like this? Well, so I was crying out to a God that I had always ran from. But little did I know there'd been a lady across the street from me that I realized today is an angel sent by God that had been praying for me and my family, and my wife had been confiding in her. Well, that night I never opened that bottle, and I didn't get high. That next morning she come over to my house and asked me how I was doing, which I just collapsed into her arms is all I remember. And she asked me if I'd be willing to go talk to her pastor, which I did, and he prayed with me, assured me that God was going to protect my children. Well, he asked me if it was okay if some of the deacons of that church could come talk to me, and I agreed to it. Well, these deacons is Charlie Melton and Tim Grantham, and they're from Eastside Baptist Church, Pearl, Mississippi. Wonderful church. And Ms. Livingston is Ms. Deanna Livingston. Wonderful lady. Her and Mr. Livingston are just angels sent for my protection. I realize that. Well, these men knocked at the door that night, and I had forgot that I had invited them. And I remember when they knocked, I thought, oh, Lord, that's them church people. And I had destroyed this coffee table. There was pieces of wood cluttered the floor. And I remember when I tried to open the door got stuck on a piece. And as soon as they looked in my door, they seen that half gallon of whiskey sitting on the table. And I assured them that I hadn't been drinking or using that night. I invited them in. They started talking, and Tim did most of the talking at first because he was little did I know he was a recovering addict. He told me, Rusty, he said, he told me his testimony, just like I'm telling you. He said, Rusty, God delivered me from the same disease from with. And he said, we can say a prayer right here tonight, and he'll deliver you too. And I just remember laughing in his face. And no, you don't know. I've done a lot more than just get high and drink some whiskey. And he said, it don't matter what you've done. God is that forgiving, and he loves you that much. And his redeeming blood can wipe the slate clean. Which I was skeptical, because I was strung out. I'd been on meth for a long time, folks. I got high on weed every single day. Well, we knelt down right there in that floor amongst that rubble. And we held hands, and I told him, I said, I had never prayed to God, and I'd prayed, but it never worked. I'd prayed every time there were blue lights in the mirror. Every time I've been arrested, I prayed, God, if you'll let me get out of here, I won't do it anymore. Well, God didn't answer them prayers, folks. But I can tell you this, when God knew when I was broken, okay, they looked at a broken human being when they walked into that house. We knelt down there and held hands, and I prayed right. They led me down the Roman road. We prayed the sinner's prayer, and I accepted Christ that night. And I can tell you this, the men, we stood up, and I remember hugging their necks. They invited me to church with them the next day, and the man that knelt down is not the same man that stood up. I can promise you that. That was January 24, 2003. I hadn't drank a bottle of whiskey, hadn't had a cold can of beer in my hand, and the chains from drugs and alcohol have been all the things that bound me and kept me bound for all them years. I had been set free. You understand? God delivered me from the grips of the devil. I was literally right in the grips of meth, every type of dope, and I had been set free. He is a chain breaker, I can promise you that, and he's a way maker. And I ended up, just to get to the meat of the story, these obedient Christians that reached out to me, a complete stranger. The men from her church didn't know me. Miss Livingston knew me, but Charlie and Tim had no idea who I was. And they came to my rescue, folks. And because of that kind of obedience, I'm sitting before you today. I'm a changed man. I've been sober for over 15 years. I'm involved in my church. God is doing amazing things in my life. So I just pray that if you're struggling, or if you have a family member that's struggling with addiction or alcoholism, don't give up on them. There is hope out there. And all you have to do is to turn to the one that hung on that cross. Because, folks, his redeeming blood can save you. I don't care what you're going through or what you've been through. He loves each one of us. God gave his only son for me and you. And I didn't understand that at the time, folks. It wasn't like I was a little kid. I was 40 years old. But I knew nothing about all this. The more I've learned over these years, I understand how Christ works. He loves every one of us. I'm doing great today. Me and my wife was only separated for the first year of my sobriety. I ended up going on to California. We're living in Oklahoma here now in Tahlequah. We're involved with a great church, great group of believers, and I've been challenged each day by Christ to grow closer to him. And I pray that this will help somebody. Feel free to share this. I'm just doing this because I'm challenging everybody that's a part of my devotion group to reach out to those that are in need. And I hope you get something from this, because we serve a mighty God, and he can do the same thing for you that he did for me. And I want to thank those brave men that came to my house and Eastside Baptist Church for stepping up and being there for somebody like me. I was saved by grace. Thank you. Hope you have a blessed day.